Dementia Researcher with a blog and a rating.
Happy New Year, everyone. In this first vlog of 2023, I wanted to talk about something that characterised my research in 2022, feeling that I was drifting in my career. Before writing this blog, I asked myself a few questions. 1. What contributed to that feeling of drifting, both in my personal and work life? What were the highs and the lows throughout that? How do I still feel that way? And was it necessarily a bad thing? Looking back on the year, it got off to a pretty rubbish start. I began the year pretty ill, meaning I was out of action for about 2 months, and from the start of the year, I was on the back foot, and I honestly feel like I'm still playing catch-up with some of those projects. Throughout last year, I found myself feeling quite detached from research, and more specifically academia. We've been through a year of increasing unease due to industrial action. Alongside this, colleagues have moved to take jobs at other universities, and several of my colleagues have left academia altogether. So perhaps I was not alone in my feeling of drifting. The year felt contradictory. We are more connected than we've been for years due to separation during the pandemic. However, in the long term, I've found that although some have returned to on-campus work, it is the minority. On a personal level, I've struggled with conducting my research in universities, which feel less vibrant and diverse than they did before the pandemic. At this point, you're probably wondering if this whole blog is going to be me sulking my way through 2022. In answering my earlier questions, I realised that actually, that the feeling of drift was not a constant one. There were multiple occasions where actually positive events in terms of progression, and while there were significant feelings of being jaded and drifting in research, that feeling itself gave me a reason to be more proactive. In my personal life, 2 very happy events happened. Firstly, my nephew was born, making me an uncle for the second time, and secondly, my close friend was discharged from hospital after a long period of illness. In my research, the feeling of being unfulfilled forced me to take stock of my work and think about what I was missing. I realised that my focus had shifted away from dementia research without me realising it, and more of my work becoming focused on COVID and older people. As I was not funded by a fellowship, it was necessary to work on projects I was not necessarily passionate about. I was forced to seek career advice from a wider group. One of the better experiences of the year was taking part in Alzheimer's Research UK Early Career Research Career Mentoring Group. This forced me to think about what science and dementia research I was passionate about making my own. It pushed me to start writing down my ideas and gave me some confidence to be more vocal that I was ready to pursue a fellowship with my own research ideas. Ultimately, this resulted in my PI supporting me in applying for an NIHR Applied Research Collaboration Fellowship, which I will begin this April. I also had a fantastic time at AAIC in San Diego, which ironically was probably made better by my mindset of feeling adrift. My PI Fiona told me to go to AAIC with an open mind, fall in love with science again, and think about what dementia research I was excited about doing on my own. This probably resulted in me attending more events than I have in the past, and being more proactive. An example of this was agreeing to take part in the Dementia Researcher podcast, which was great fun and led me to contribute to these blogs. Being detached from my day-to-day research has meant I've put my energy into other things. Last year I was asked to be a deputy leader of EDI in our research institute at Newcastle. This is something that I have been increasingly passionate about over my time of research. So in answering my questions to myself, there was actually quite a bit going on in both my personal and work life that contributed to the feeling of drifting through research. Illness setting me back and frustratingly playing catch-up, and the new normal of blended on-campus and home working is probably the biggest. I think it's unhealthy to pretend that these problems don't exist, and in research there is probably too much pretending everything is fine due to a sense of imposter syndrome, and if you are not constantly progressing, you are failing. So maybe the best thing is to say this year hasn't been a stellar work year, but actually there were some good things that peppered in between. And in hindsight, the few high points, a nephew, a friend's recovery, and a fellowship, will be more impactful in the long run. Finally, do I still feel like I'm drifting? On the whole, no. I think it's important to recognise a lot of the things that caused the feeling is still ongoing, and it's probably not a binary. That being said, I do feel like I'm going to 2023 with a bit of momentum. Surprisingly, recently I've been thinking that maybe drifting isn't always a bad thing. That feeling is probably trying to tell us something, either that we're ready to be more challenged, or it is time to change course. Or perhaps it's as simple as we have complicated lives and we need some time to slow down and rebalance our research and non-research interests. It's probably unrealistic to expect ourselves to be constantly climbing the ladder without a breather. As my younger sister wisely said to me, progress is never linear.
Thank you for listening. Join the Dementia Research bloggers and share your own views.